Welcome, folks, to Property Careers Prospector School online. This is where we hope to expand on the stuff that we teach inside of Property Careers Prospector School. And as the title suggests, with Prospector, this is all about the procurement of, in our instance, our industry, property sellers. And the very first thing that I ask you to consider as you start to look at the strategy and the way that it unfolds is understanding that, and we want to take this from an almost standing start. If you've been, or if you're one of those people who are listening to this now, or if you've joined the webinar and you're doing it for the first time, I'm hoping that this is going to be a good learning experience for you. For those of you that are coming back, I'm hoping that you will be moving it from the learn to the earn, and that you're actually now training on what we're going to share inside this series. You see, I think this is the least understood thing about the learning experience and how you take things from a concept, an idea, and move them practically into your repertoire as a, sales professional. I've no doubt that all of you are aspiring to, at some stage, move into the space where you are indeed a consummate professional. So just a little bit of a wrap so that you understand where I'm coming from. I've never understood, and I still don't to this day, how people in our business can talk about it in terms of work and believe that they struggle with it. I mean, one of the things I hear most often is people saying that, they work hard. Well, hard work, I just don't see that this business that we're in is hard work. Like, let's face it, we get up in the morning, we go to work at a civil hour, we wear nice clean clothes, we return home in those nice clean clothes. And yeah, we spend some hours at it. And yes, there is some work involved, but to my mind, the work, which is what we're going to talk about today, the strategy that underpins prospecting, I reckon that's where the hard work is really done. Yeah, because once you understand how things can unfold for you, it starts to make a lot more sense. So if you are taking notes, and I thoroughly recommend that you do, preferably you've got it inside of a journal, and in that journal you're taking those notes, and just the mere act of writing these things down, as they become apparent to you, or even as a reinforcement, you don't necessarily have to revisit those notes, because the way the mind works is the writing of those things in the first instance is what causes that memory retention to be kicked into gear. If you are here for a second time and you're hearing some of this stuff and you can even predict what I'm likely to say, good for you. That means that you've moved from training to knowing. And if you know it, well, then the final question that has to come into place is this one. If it makes perfect sense to you and you know how it works, why aren't you doing it? Because if you were to do it, you would be, as I start to outlay this strategy, you would be in an advanced position and fully appreciating it. You see, the one thing that I've never understood about prospecting, and still don't to this day, is why many real estate agents look at the prospecting equation from a disposition of having to talk to a great number of people before you strike pay dirt. This makes no sense to me. And I've shared this analogy a thousand times. I say that all of us, in terms of our attitude, we either have one where we are hardworking, nothing wrong with that, or lazy. Now, I fall into the latter category in that I'd have to confess this, lazy. This does not mean that being lazy has left me in a disposition where I don't aspire to things. It doesn't mean that I'm not competitive. It just merely means that I prefer to spend more time thinking about something than actually doing it. And for me, rings true, and if you are writing notes, I ask you to write it down again, that the reality is that a day in reconnaissance is definitely a week saved in battle. And to me, strategically understanding what you're trying to do makes perfect sense. Look, I was reminded of this yesterday when one of my clients, I was looking at them putting together an accolade for a record sale on a property, and it had all of these attributes, and I'm talking many, many millions of dollars. It is in excess of $10 million. And then the message that they were trying to convey out there into the real estate world and procuring clients is that they've got this property that they've sold for this amount of money. And there was lots of words and all sorts of things in there. But I must admit, there was lots of what I would have to say was ego-driven stuff. You see, they say that, let's just talk about dresses. They say that women don't necessarily dress for men. They apparently dress for other women. So there's a bit of a competitive thing, and they like to feel good about that. Now, I don't know whether that's true, but one thing that I do know is true is this. Real estate agents, when they're promoting their accomplishments or what they've done in the pursuit of sellers, don't necessarily advertise to capture their imagination. They are more inclined to advertise for other real estate agents. They like to talk about the fact that they got a great price. They like to talk about the fact that they sold a property that others maybe weren't able to sell, or they sold a property quickly. None of this makes sense to me. Strategically, you've got to look at when you're advertising, what you're advertising for and what you're trying to do. So in the prospecting game, surely to my mind, the whole objective here is to take significant market share, to be in a position where you've run prospecting scenarios so that you don't have to prospect to the same manner, in the future. We hope that eventually you won't be looking under rocks for listings, that in fact, you'll have sellers coming to you. So I've always understood, I get it, initially we've got to go out and find and locate them, and then, get them in front of these people, run listing presentations. To my mind, that's the entire purpose. And then once we've done that, we want to win those listings to make sales, to make money, and we hope that off those listings they bring others. So that is a true assumption. So all of these things started to make a lot more sense to me. So I looked at it and I realized almost straight away that all forms of prospecting work. I'm not here to disagree with that. But what I started to understand was that some prospecting work methods work way better than others. And this allowed me to start looking at a strategy. So getting back to that analogy, I said in terms of your attitude, you're either hardworking or lazy. Again, preferring to be lazy. Let's move that over to aptitude. And I say in terms of your aptitude, you're either smart or, quite frankly, you are stupid. And I don't mean stupid in the academic sense. Don't anyone be threatened by me saying that. What I guess I'm trying to convey again to you is that some of us, we tend to go down the path of doing things a certain way because everyone says that's the way they've always been done. Now, for me, I look at certain things and I just go, it doesn't make any sense. So the strategy that I'm about to unfold to you is one that's designed by a lazy person, one that's designed by someone who is extremely competitive and has a desire to win, and one that wants to make a lot of money. But I don't do this with the attitude of saying to myself, I've got to work hard to do it. You see, in this day and age, I think if you can outsmart something that is far more prosperous, that delivers to you an amplified result, more so than going out there and saying, I have to work hard in order to succeed. Ours is not a business of grunt and work. It's also not a business of thoroughness. I see this a lot. I see lots of people wanting to be absolutely perfect before they go and attack something. That too, to me, makes little sense, if any at all. You see, ours is a business of effect. Now, let's just look at the very thing that we're coveting, the very thing that we are trying to do. Surely we're pushing for a position that we want to find a number of clients and build a following and a reputation or delivering a product that has people coming to us automatically. So whilst I agree to begin with, you've got to go and attract the attention inside of a marketplace, I also say to you without apology that the objective is to get to a point where people, sellers, are coming to you. Then I started to analyze what was going on inside of markets, and I've got to say that I was one of these. And I wanted, rather than just trying in developing a strategy for people like yourselves, I didn't want to come in and say, look, the only way you're going to succeed in this business is by working hard. And I didn't want to go one step further and say, and you'll be sentenced to hard work for the remainder of your professional career. Surely you would look at me and think, well, what's the point of even talking to this bloke if all he's got in store for us is hard work? So again, every method works, but we have to look at a strategy that delivers us into a position where we are truly competitive. We have a majority share of that marketplace, and that marketplace share is won in perpetuity. And so it is, here's the first thing that I say to you. Most prospecting strategies have at their core a productive ideal that underpins it. That we want to win listings, to make sales, to make money. That is a productive strategy. And I guess everyone gets that, and I guess everyone runs that. And I think that is why some of us just go, let's get stuck into it. Let's put the hard work in place and, let's make it work. Problem with that is this: if you keep following that strategy and that becomes ingrained into your mind, then what you're going to do is this stop-start thing. You're going to find sellers. You're going to spend a lot of time trying to get them sold. When you get them sold, you're going to run out of stock and you're going to go back to the beginning. And I see this exasperate wherever I go. I also see that prospecting generally works in clusters. So if you're talking about it on a macro sense with a large team, that the team tend to go wherever the action is. So if we're having success over in this little corner of the marketplace, the rest of the team see that and they're feeding off of it. Before you know it, you've got good market share over here, but you're losing market share in another sector of the marketplace. And on observation, here is one thing that's always made perfect sense to me. I look at a strategy and I say, okay, it's all right to work hard for a period of time, but I must be doing this on the premise that eventually I won't have to work hard and things will come to me fairly easily. So how do I gratify that? I look at it and I say that the strategy, if we're to follow one, must not only be productive, we want to produce results fairly quickly, but importantly, it has to be progressive. And every other strategy that I've looked at in prospecting seems to be lacking in this area. It doesn't deliver on the promise of some sort of permanency on market share. However, on observation, I would look at certain marketplaces and it seems to me that the case is the same no matter where I go. So it doesn't matter whether I'm somewhere, on the North or South Island of New Zealand, in any suburb or any major centre or any major hub. Doesn't matter if I'm in far North Queensland for that matter, or even all the way down in Adelaide, in suburban Adelaide, looking at particular markets. Every market I look at, whether it's micro, whether it's over across a few thousand houses or across an entire suburb, which might be 10 or 15,000 houses, or across the whole region of 25,000. It appears to me that generally speaking, especially in those small markets, and this is where the advantage can be garnished, that 60 to 90% of each market, especially if it's over about 4,000 or 5,000 houses, that particular sector is typically being dominated by three main agents. When I say dominated, they're often controlling anywhere from about 60% between them of that marketplace to as high as 90%. I call these agencies the players, and on observation, what I realized was that these agents didn't need to prospect the same as other agents might. And in fact, if you started to look at the prospecting that they did do, it didn't involve much of the hand-to-hand combat, the chasing of sellers that you see other agents do. What do I mean by that? Continually over a protracted period, shoving things in letterboxes, offering things like market appraisals and the otherwise or similar, so coming down and having a look at the property well before they want to sell. This is a complete nonsense, and I'll share my thoughts on that as we go. So they would do all this sort of stuff, which didn't make any sense, because when I looked at those players in that marketplace, seemingly not all of them, but at least one of them automatically fell onto the shopping list, the agents that would be considered should anyone decide to market or sell property in that marketplace. And then the next phenomenon made itself clear to me, because I looked at it and I said, well, why are these agents automatically on the shopping list? And it just made perfect sense on observation. I realized that it was the fact that they had significant presence in the marketplace, and with that came a whole raft of activity, which meant that they were present in that marketplace and easy for the seller to see. So it was that I realized that listings beget listings. So once you have listings, it's those listings and their exposure of them in the marketplace that caused other property sellers to then consider that agency. And as long as you weren't an idiot and you said the right things, that more listings came on board. So listings get listings. And then I took it even one step further. I said, well, what is it about the listings, or how do they know? So in this day and age, you hear this often where, people say you've got to have online presence. Being online is a very big thing to bringing listings on board. Well, I totally disagree with that. I'm not saying that it doesn't raise your profile. I'm not saying it's not a consideration. But what I am saying is the primary draw card for any seller to consider any agent is typically signboards on properties, the for sale boards. So if you've got for sale signs on properties, this is the number one draw card for any property seller. Of course, if that is supported by lots of other activity going on, and in particular good online presence, well, then you automatically find yourself on that shopping list. So that's the players. The rest of the agents, they are typically what I refer to as the contenders, and the contenders all want to be players. So as a result, they get in there and they grind away. And when they get one listing, or typically two, they fail to make some very significant observations. And so it is that I'm going to start to outlay this strategy to you. If we know that the number one draw card is signs on properties, we have to figure out not how to do hand-to-hand combat, because here's the reality. If you're trying to break into a market, or you're trying to reinvigorate a market, you could choose, if it was a few thousand properties, to then go, I'll go and meet those people one at a time. And I will state my case to those people, and I will hope that they will give me a go, or they might consider me. And if I win that listing, then I'll do a really good job and sell it and see how I go from there. Well, these are fundamental flaws inside of these strategies that leave behind. They satisfy productivity, but they leave behind progression. They're not progressive. So it is that I look at it like this. I say, look, if the number one draw card is presence, how can we create presence whilst negating the need to go out there and meet people one-on-one? Whilst it's possible to meet people one-on-one, by the time I got to meet them all and started to win their favor, it could be too late, because I haven't made any sales, I haven't broken into the market, and this would then render the whole concept quite protracted. Perhaps this is why, success seems to be reserved for people that are prepared to work hard beyond belief and put up with meager progress for a while before winning and trying to grind their way through. But to me, I think that, you know, a lot of us might give up before we ever garnish that success. So how do we really do something about this? Well, here's the thing, if you're writing it down. You see, there's a tool that's available to us in this day and age, so long as it isn't abused, so long as it's used the right way, will deliver to you remarkable results and very, very quickly. That tool, that profession, that skill base, if you like, is marketing. And what marketing is, a lot of people sadly mistake this for advertising, and all advertising is getting the word out. And yes, advertising is a component of marketing, and advertising is altogether necessary. But, you know, I just did a little session on this where I explained to people that the purpose of advertising is to generate inquiry. It's not to just amplify the word out. You can have an ad that pushes a message out, and that message can be a bad one. So the more advertising you do, the quicker you speed up the process by which people realize you cannot deliver. So if advertising is getting the word out, what is marketing? Well, marketing is the message that's contained inside the advertising medium. And marketing, if I was to give it a description, it's about creating perceptions. If you can create the perception of being a player before you are, and people frequent your business and put you on the shopping list, and then you start to win a lot of listings, well, then that perception that you've created then becomes reality. And this is the key component to succeeding in the prospecting game, to create the perception of presence with the intent of making it a reality. So if we then adopt a military strategy, we say the first phase of our strategy is to create a foothold into the market. And that foothold is created by marketing the concept of presence, that we appear to be as present, if not more so, than each of the players in that particular marketplace. The second part of the strategy, I hope makes a lot of sense too, is that we don't want to market, or we don't want to attract the attention of those property owners who aren't selling. So it's here I start to give definition, and I think radically, even in terms of the protocols that we run strategically, that they brutally, if you like, contrast against more traditional prospecting methods. Most traditional prospecting methods present our profession in a quite a servile manner, where we come out to the marketplace and we say, on an obligation-free basis, at any time, call us for a valuation or an updated opinion of value on your property. Now, of course, the only thing that we can really offer there is a comparison, or what we call comparative value, based on other properties that we've had for sale and what they've sold for. Now, this is simply a little bit of a nonsense. It's a subjective thing. And I've always maintained the attitude of, why shovel coal into a hole where there's no fire? So if the person with whom you're communicating with and spending man hours presenting an idea or a concept or an opinion on price, which is just subjective and has no real relevance, especially given that they're not putting their property on the market, doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So the next part of this strategy that I want to share with you is this, and I hope you're writing it down. I say that all property owners are only ever in one of two states as far as we're concerned. They're either dormant. A dormant property owner is somebody who is always interested in the state of the market. They're most certainly interested in the current comparative value and or market value of their property, but they're not actually making a move and they've no intention of selling whatsoever. So if we were fishing, these are the kind of the fishing, but these are and we're casting a net, these are the schnooks. These aren't the the fish that we're after, because, as I say, they're interested, but they're not actually moving. So there's no money to be gained. I find it fascinating that agents offer their services around estimating the value or calculating the value of a property, yet this is not what we get paid for. We get paid to sell property, to move people on, not to get into subjective opinions about what we think a property might sell for. So there's the dormant property owner. And I'm not interested in connecting with those people, especially when you understand this part of the strategy. You see, the dormant property owners, we don't need to attract those, because if we build the market share properly and become one of the players, should they become active by virtue of the fact that we have presence in the marketplace and we are active, they will come to us anyway. Do not get anxious about connecting with every property owner in the prospecting game. This is, quite frankly, irrelevant, to be honest. Yep. But what you should be especially paranoid about is making the connection with those that are selling. Property owners that are selling. We call these active property sellers. And later in this series, I'll give much more gravity to it, but just understand this, that people, when they've made a decision to move and make a sale around the property, before they engage an agent, they like to do research around the value of the property before contacting an agent. We call these active property sellers, and by virtue of the title alone, they are quite active in the marketplace. They are extremely aware and observant of any activity that befalls the real estate market, especially that which is directly located around where their property might be located. And if we can capture their imagination, we automatically fall onto the shopping list. So I am acutely aware of all of the instruments that will make these people, in the first instance, consider our property, consider our agency. So in the foothold stage, the first aim is to become a consideration. And all we're looking for is seed listings. Now that's the first part of the strategy inside attraction. And now comes the next part. So what we want to do is we want to break into the market with these seed listings. As you win these listings, your first thought then needs to be strategically, how do I get this listing and turn it, leverage off it to win two more? So those two more listings, once we understand how to leverage off those two, we want to leverage off the next two that we've got and turn those into four. So it is that traction, and that's what we call it, once you've got foothold, which is breaking in with the seed listings, and then we move to traction. Traction is about building market share. Now back to foothold. If we want to get good traction, surely you would understand that the best place to garnish a foothold is in highly visible locations inside of that marketplace. And what I've always understood, the best real estate listings, if we're to talk about location, which is the primary consideration, are those that which are on the quieter streets, in the cul-de-sacs, the quieter locations. But for people to get in and out of those properties, they have to frequent the main arterial roads. So if we can win listings on the main arterial roads, this will further enhance the perception that we are actually everywhere, and this will cause us to fall onto the shopping list, and you win those seed listings, and from those seed listings you can then move to traction. So this is the second part of the strategy, moving from foothold to traction, as I said, building market share. Now, the thing is, once you actually have a listing, each time that you do, you now have a voice in the marketplace. And this is where the strategy starts to make even more sense, because I explain that You don't have to, once you've got listings in the marketplace, you don't have to look for your next seller because they're already watching you. So if you can control the message that emanates from that listing, be it through the signboard, be it through the advertising, be it through the open for inspections that you're going to conduct, and looking at that and visiting those open for inspections and the like are other active property sellers, will you win their favor and move forward? So again, the next part of the strategy, and this is another flaw, this is the thing where a lot of real estate agents make the mistake. When they win a listing, they immediately start thinking about what they've got to do to sell it. And they want to sell it, and then after they've sold it, they want to use that success to leverage into new listings. Well, what we will teach you here at Pröspector School is that you also need to leverage off the beginnings. When you first list the property, you need to utilize that leverage to win a listing immediately. Don't wait for the buyers to come. Don't wait for the open for inspections. I'm not saying that we won't use those later on, but we want to do something about it right now. And then when you build that market share, we have to know what the optimum level is. So as we build that market share, we then move into the next phase, which is what we call momentum. When you reach that optimum market share, all you want to do is retain. So what you get, and that optimum market percentage, if you like, is roughly 30% of the market. Now that can blow out a little bit to maybe 40. It can come back a little if you like, but if it's somewhere between 20 and 40% of a marketplace, I can almost guarantee you that you are going to be happy and smile on your dial, and you're going to have continuity or prospect flow that moves across into your product. Now, we already talked about the fact inside of building market share and traction that we have a voice in the marketplace. Once you move into momentum, you can pre-sell because people start to come to your brand because of the evidence they see inside that marketplace. And that momentum, now people say to me, 30%, why wouldn't you go for more than that? Well, the reality is that in both the Australian and New Zealand market, I've always also understood that people reject monopolies. We love you when you're an underdog and you're starting out, but as soon as you start to garnish some success, if you get too big for your boots, you can actually go, it can have the adverse effect where people start to begrudge that and it goes back the other way. So it is that I say, and it's probably the first time I've said this to anything other than management clients, I don't know why agents have this hankering to be the number one or the loudest real estate agent in their marketplace. I'd much prefer to be a silent second. You see, when you're a silent second and you're not blurting it out too much, people don't begrudge your success. It's extremely lucrative. You don't find yourself fighting to retain that number one disposition, and you have, for all intents and purposes, great market share. So what I say openly to you all now as part of the strategy, when you progress to getting a 30% market share, if you indeed aspire to having more sales and more listings, don't try to drain the orange that you've got any further. Instead, increase the size of the marketplace that you've got, or maybe go and look at a new area and start the whole process again. Once you get into momentum, a 30% market share or thereabouts inside that market is extremely prosperous, it's extremely profitable, it's extremely lucrative. And with money on your side and all of the tools that go with it and a sound understanding of how marketing works, you can then move into the new phase, the fourth phase, which is automation, where you can stimulate the prospect flow without your intervention at all. You can do this through marketing. You can do this with off and on, making sure that there's other instruments that go out, which we'll share during the remainder of this series, and showing you how you do that to actually put in place what we refer to prospect flow. This is the primary consideration if you've got a constancy of listing inquiry rather than sales inquiry of people wanting to buy properties, then you truly are impervious to all market conditions moving forward. So there it is. I hope that I've laid out for you the strategy in its entirety. Of course, next week, on the next installment, I should say this, we'll be covering a plan specifically that is tailored for you to initiate this strategy and carry it all the way through. We'll put it down to details. Once you understand the strategy, the next thing is to implement it. Be aware of this though, folks. It's the most important thing the message that I can leave you with on this installment of Pröspector School. Whether you know this or you're conscious of this or not, you are running a strategy and you need to be aware of it, and you need to be aware of its mechanism and what you can expect in return. I often say to people, if you sit down and you analyze it, you'll suddenly realize if you're not happy with the yield that you're getting, it's contained inside the strategy that you're following. If you want to run hand-to-hand combat, if you want to work hard in order to, become successful, good luck to you. But if you stick with this strategy, if you allow me to expand it, allow me how to show you how to run that mechanism properly, you can enjoy sustained success with a degree of permanency, with very little input by way of work. And to my mind, that is the true measure of real estate success. My name's Mark Dwyer, Mark with a K at propertycareers.com.au is where you can contact me, or by mobile phone +61 410 592 165. Welcome aboard, and I look forward to spending the next 14 odd installments with you on Property Careers Pröspector School.